Welcome to NCSS Here for You. Since 1958, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to high-quality services which promote healthy living and emotional well-being to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. We take our role in the community seriously and strive to provide the highest quality services. According to Eric Erickson, a noted developmental psychologist, every person must pass through a series of 8 interrelated stages over the entire life cycle. NCSS provides a continuum of services to meet the needs of individuals who at any point seek assistance. NCSS's purpose is creating a stronger community, one person at a time. Now, let's get to today's show.
I'm Joe Halko, Director of Community Relations for Northwestern Counseling and Support Services, and welcome to another episode of NCSS Here for You. Each month in this program, we discuss a human services topic, and we do that with staff from one of our 3 service divisions. Our 3 service divisions are Behavioral Health Services, Children, Youth, and Family Services, and Developmental Services. And on occasion, we have guests from organizations that NCSS collaborates with throughout the year. This month's episode is titled Applied Behavior Analysis, Helping Kids and Families. Applied behavior analysis is a process of systematically applying interventions based upon the principles of learning theory to improve socially significant behaviors to a meaningful degree, and to demonstrate that the interventions employed are responsible for the improvement in behavior. Now, what does all that mean? To discuss this subject in greater detail, I'm pleased to introduce this month's guests. They are Ashley Cosgrove, Applied Behavior Services Team Leader, Sherry Keith, Applied Behavior Services Consultant, and Morgan Murky, Applied Behavior Services Specialist. I'd like to welcome all of you to the program.
Thanks.
So, to get started, let's delve into what is applied behavior analysis.
Yeah, well, you kind of alluded to that in the introduction, but basically what that means is it is the application of behavior principles, so all these principles based in years and years of research, applied to everyday situations. And basically what that means is over time, we target particular behaviors for either increase or decrease. And through intervention, we see that change in behavior and through data tracking. So some of those behaviors we look at changing maybe things like self-help skills for children or adults, play skills, communication, and then we also target some behaviors for decrease, such as aggression or self-injury. So ABA has a lot of support in research, and it's an evidence-based treatment. And the research actually goes back more than 50 years to support ABA. And most of that research is actually based to help remediate the effects of autism spectrum disorder. It's considered a safe and effective treatment for autism. And in some states, both private insurance and Medicaid are actually mandated to pay for ABA services if medically necessary.
Now, Ashley, you mentioned evidence-based, and for the audience, I think it's important that they realize when you talk about a certain type of model, the difference between and the importance of evidence-based and what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, all of the interventions we use sort of as an ABA package have a lot of research supporting basically that it's effective and that it works. And the nice thing about that is when we're writing programs for kids, we can go back and turn to the research, and ethically we're responsible to do so. So we'll look back and, see the most effective way to teach, say, toothbrushing, for example. That might include things like prompting or reinforcement that have been proven over time to be effective interventions. So we know what we're using is going to work. And if not, we know that we can go to the research and sort of tweak things to make sure that it does work.
Got it. Okay. Now, how does your team utilize applied behavior analysis here at NCSS?
Yeah. We determine our goals based on our own observations with the client in combination with maybe what the parents or caregivers report. And we do one of 2 things. The first thing we do is ask, is there a chronic skill deficit or a skill that maybe that child doesn't have that typical peers would have at that time. Some examples would be communicating their wants and needs, engaging with peers cooperatively, toothbrushing, toileting, following multiple component instructions. And then from there, if the answer is yes, then we do some sort of skills assessment. We have a couple go-tos that we use for skills assessments. We have the Verbal Behavior Milestones Assessment and Placement Program. It's called the VB map. ABLES, the Assessment of Basic Language Learning Skills, and the APLES, the Assessment of Functional Living Skills. And then we ask ourselves the second question: are there any behaviors that interfere with a child being able to communicate or participate in their environment? So if there's any behavior excesses, for example, we might have a child who tantrums too much. It's not normal in intensity or duration. We would need to figure out what's happening around that behavior when it occurs, and we do that by doing a functional behavior assessment. So when we can figure out why that behavior is occurring, then we can appropriately develop an intervention for that behavior.
Now, what is the role of the behavior specialist on your team?
Yeah, so I'm a behavioral specialist on the ABS team, and we do essentially two things. We provide direct service to clients, and we also do parent training in my role. So as as a behavioral specialist, a one-on-one session could look a little different because we're working on a variety of skills, such as communication, social, play skills, things like that. And we do that in the home or community setting. We also provide parent training, which usually happens in the home to help parents with implementing different interventions or procedures around ABA. And we're still working on those same sets of skills, communication, play skills, social skills, or decreasing those maladaptive behaviors that Ashley was alluding to. So we're teaching parents how to use ABA strategies and procedures to help the child either increase or decrease behaviors. And also, as a behavioral specialist, I also meet with different members of the client's support team to help collaborate and work together to see how we can help the child the most. And we also have time to make materials and meet with consultants to talk about different cases and things like that.
How extensive can the support team be as far as when you talk about other members of the team?
Yeah, different members on our team, like we might go to a consultant or our team leader, but they might have other services through NCSS, different teams. We could meet with them, meet with the parents, obviously, or caregivers. We could work with outside providers. They might be getting speech or OT services in the school, collaborating with them to see how we can best benefit the clients.
Now, what is the role of the behavior consultant on the team?
There's a lot of parts to my job, but one of the main things that I do is provide trainings in applied behavior analysis to the behavior specialists, and also support the behavior specialists in implementing the behavior acquisition or the behavior reduction programs. So, for example, a behavior consultant might oversee 2 or 3 staff who are implementing behavior programs for maybe 10 to 14 clients. So with that being said, the other part of my job is to actually create those programs. For example, if Morgan were to come to me and say, "Oh, I just got a new client, they won't get their hair cut," I would guide Morgan to collect different types of data. She would bring that data back to me. I would analyze it to figure out what's going on when that behavior occurs, and I would come up with a recommendation based on that data. Another example would be, again, we get a new client, a behavior specialist comes to me and says, "Wow, they haven't learned to tell me when they're thirsty. They can't say that they're hurt." So I would guide the behavior specialist to pick the appropriate skills assessment, and then I would create a program for skill acquisition.
Now, what does a typical applied behavior analysis session look like for a client that's being served by the team?
That is a great question, Joe. It really depends. It's truly 100% individual. It 100% depends on the client's needs. So for example, if we have a client who really only needs help with communication, so learning to request their wants and needs, maybe following multiple component instructions, telling a story. Maybe they come to the office and they just work on that. Other kids need help with maybe some functional living skills. They haven't learned to safely cross a road or tie their shoes or brush their teeth. Maybe they're not toilet trained yet, and they might, just be working on that. We also might get a kiddo who, lacks appropriate social interactions, or maybe they have inappropriate behavior that impedes in their, ability to participate in the community. So we might just work on that, or we do some sort of combination of the three.
Sure.
So it's really great. It totally depends on the kiddo's needs and what the parents or caregivers identify as goals that need to be worked on.
One of the important things that all of you are mentioning is the fact that people need to realize each and every case is different, because it's not as if somebody walks into an office, says, here's what I'm dealing with, and it's a cookie cutter approach of saying, okay, great, we're going to do A, B, C, and D, and that'll be grand. So in the work that you do, each and every individual is just that, an individual, so therefore all the component parts of what you must enact to help them is going to be kind of like putting, I guess, a puzzle together. Would that be a correct assessment of what takes place?
Right. I forgot to mention that, there are some misconceptions in the community about ABA, and it's unfortunate that there are some lingering misconceptions. So I've heard, for example, well, isn't ABA just teaching rote memorization, or that thing with the flashcards at the table? And that's not true at all. It might be a part of what we do. And I like to give this example. If we think about toothbrushing, I think for us, we take that for granted. There's lots of steps involved in it, but we have to break it down for these kids to teach these individual steps. So if we think about toothbrushing, we have to discriminate. We need to know the difference between the bathroom, the living room, the kitchen. So we might teach that. We have to get to the bathroom. We open the medicine cabinet, and inside there might be mom's toothbrush and dad's toothbrush and sister's toothbrush, or maybe floss or makeup or whatever else is in the medicine cabinet. And we have a kiddo who hasn't learned to scan. They can't look at all these things in the medicine cabinet and identify the toothbrush. Or maybe they haven't learned the motor imitation or the action of actually brushing the teeth. So what we would do is maybe teach parts of that at the table. So we might use a flashcard or actual objects, and we might teach them, where's the toothbrush, and teach them to identify the toothbrush or label the toothbrush or answer the question, what do you brush your teeth with? And then we would teach the actual actions, taking off the cap to the toothpaste, applying the appropriate amount of paste on the brush, and then actually brushing the teeth. So we would do that at the table, but if we only did that, we wouldn't be doing a good job at providing a good ABA service, because ultimately we need these kids to be independent in the community. So we want to fade that. So yep, we do some stuff at the table, and then we teach it in the natural environment, and then hopefully they can do it on their own.
And Sher, you mentioned that trying to overcome this stigma, or whatever you want to call it. Why did that occur? Why did people feel that ABA was a certain thing that perhaps it's not? Is there something that caused that, or?
Yes, absolutely. So ABA stems from the experimental analysis of behavior. So if we look back to early psychology and behaviorism, that stems from Skinner, B.F. Skinner, or other people, Pavlov, if we remember the dogs. And that is where it stemmed from. So that helped us decide how we're going to act scientifically, and it gave us parameters of what behavior is. So it's anything an organism does. It's the stuff that we can see and do and observe. But there was a shift from doing it in a clinic setting or experimentally, which is where it stems from, to doing it applied. So we're now looking at socially significant behaviors in the environment in which they occur. So that's the shift, and I think that's where we've got off track.
I see.
And there has been a big development in ethics as well. I mean, applied behavioral analysis has its own ethical guidelines to follow. So along with that shift from more of the experimental clinical setting to the applied setting, we use more things like reinforcement. We try to work on behaviors that are meaningful to individuals. Where I think some of the experimental analysis in that early work was, they did do some experimental exposures around punishment and things like that. So I think a lot of it kind of stems from that, although it has made this great shift to, the applied setting, using it with individuals with disabilities, and with that comes using reinforcement and very positive interventions as well.
Now, how many hours of applied behavior analysis are enough to see results?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and the answer really is it depends. A lot of research shows for intensive early intervention that children could use upwards of 40 hours a week of intensive ABA intervention. As you can imagine, that's probably very hard, kind of unrealistic in some aspects to support. But it really depends. I mean, it depends on, is the child getting access to ABA services maybe in their school day programming? How involved are the parents? Are they able to implement some of the procedures we recommend throughout their regular day? Because that also counts as hours of ABA service. We'd also look at how fast is this child acquiring new skills, and maybe some kids acquire things faster and don't need as many hours to see results. But I mean, the main point is we're really looking at our data, and we're looking at how fast are these kids acquiring the skills they need, and most importantly, are they retaining the skills that they've learned? And if the answer is yes, they're on track and they're retaining skills, then maybe 5 hours a week is enough for that child. But again, every child is different. So one child might need 5 hours a week of intervention, another child may need 25 hours a week to see the same results. And not every child responds the same to ABA services. So we've really tried to encourage parents to get involved, have the other team members get involved in their intervention so that, as a whole package, how can we help this child gain the skills they need and be consistent?
And speaking of parents, how are parents involved in applied behavioral analysis services? I know you had touched on the fact of it's always good if they can be a part of the equation, but to what degree, or how does this all work as far as parents are concerned?
Yeah, I mean, they can be involved in a variety of ways. One way that parents can be involved is engaging in parent training that a specialist or a consultant can provide the family. Within that parent training, we obviously work on the child's needs around behavior, communication, living skills, or decreasing that maladaptive behavior. Another way parents can be involved is following and implementing the behavior plans that are created for that child, even when staff members aren't in the home or with the child, keeping that going throughout their day and keeping that consistent. Another way they can be involved is just asking questions. As things arise, they can ask us, they can ask other team members, and being transparent and being able to communicate. That really helps get their questions answered, and we can provide support around that. And we have parents that like to do their own research. We, suggest an intervention or a procedure, and they like to do their own research and get their own understanding. So that's another way they can be involved in ABS services.
Now, can you tell me some challenges that your team experiences?
Yeah, I think our biggest challenge at this point is our growth. We've been operating for less than 2 years. We're currently serving 47 clients overall, and we are getting a large number of referrals. And I think a lot of those referrals are coming from kids that are newly diagnosed with autism, because research really supports early intervention. So we want to get those children's services as soon as they're diagnosed to see the most effects. So we're getting a large volume of referrals, which of course is more staff, more space.
Sure.
And also, all this programming is so individualized. It takes a lot of time, to create it, and it takes a lot of training and a lot of oversight and ongoing data tracking. So that is definitely our biggest challenge. I think another challenge is making sure that we can serve kids the sufficient number of hours that they need with the amount of staff that we have. So we're getting creative, and we're working with the state to get more funding to help expand our team. And I think it'll be interesting in the future, because a lot of these kids that we serve, they'll need this service probably throughout their lifetime. And we do serve children up to age 21. That might not be as intense in the amount of hours as they get older, but it's still difficult because we don't typically discharge children very frequently. This treatment's, pretty ongoing. So, as we look to the future, we kind of wonder what that means for our team and how big we will be growing. But it's also exciting that the service is available now for people that didn't have access prior.
And you mentioned about the growth, and then of course there's the implication of staff and the need for more staff.
Yeah.
Is how difficult is it to find individuals that have the appropriate education, to fit with the program?
Well, the nice part is for the behavior specialists, we do all the training. So right up front, the behavior specialists go through about 40 hours of basic ABA training. So in that respect, it's not hard to find qualified people because we're willing to do the training. And there's a lot of oversight through the consultants or people that maybe have a master's degree in ABA or our board certified behavior analyst overseeing all that work. So in that respect, it's not difficult to train people. I think what's difficult is once you get up to like the consultant level or finding people that are willing to maybe become board certified behavior analysts, because we definitely have a need for that for our agency.
Now, can you tell me some success stories that you've had as a team?
Yeah. As Ash was saying, everyone responds differently to ABA treatment, but the great thing about it is that it is rooted in research. It's scientific. So every kid has made progress on our team, whether it's in skill acquisition or reducing unwanted behaviors. But I can tell a story that I think is somewhat common. We get a new client and we meet the family for the first time, and they might ask questions, are they going to have a job? Can they ever talk?
Sure.
And we can't answer those questions, but we're going to make a plan. We're going to start this treatment. And being there for the first words that are said, and 2 years later, the kid can speak, or they're engaging with their peers. They're able to go to school. So being part of that is truly amazing. It's awesome.
And I think for those who don't have children that are struggling in this area, it's probably hard for them to understand to what degree children need assistance when they're dealing with these struggles. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I just think it's important that when people are out and they come across families where they may have a child who is struggling, that they have maybe a better understanding and more compassion and empathy.
Absolutely. I think what we see a lot when we get involved in cases, oftentimes, maybe a behavior has been going on for a while. So the family, what often happens is there's, some stigma, and they stop going in the community and they stop bringing their child to the restaurant or to the grocery store due to maybe some of their challenging behaviors. Maybe the child doesn't do well around crowds, or they have limited communication skills. So, they scream, or they have some like STEM behaviors. So we try to encourage parents using small steps to get back out into the community and, give them the support and resources they need in order to do that, because you can't change a behavior if you don't allow the opportunity for it to occur. So a lot of our work might take place in the restaurant, and the family's goal is, hey, I want to be able to bring my child out to a restaurant and have them sit and learn to have a quiet voice. So maybe that's where we start. And a lot of times families come to us with a whole list of things they want to change or improve, and what we try to do is sort of make a hierarchy of those needs and address them one at a time, so we don't overwhelm the child, we don't overwhelm the family, and we also help them see some success in the procedures.
How about the effect of other siblings in a family, where they either are going to be helpful or non-helpful depending on the family setting? What do you typically see there?
I mean, just from a personal experience, my sister has developmental delays, not necessarily autism, and ABA wasn't a option for her. She's an adult now, but as a sibling of an individual with special needs, I think it really depends on the person. I was very involved. I went to IEP meetings with my sister when I was in high school and really advocated for her, and I just wanted to be a support for her. But I think there's some siblings that don't feel that strongly, and just trying to provide them the support that they need and they're valued, and just trying to explain to parents that yes, this sibling has a lot of needs, but you have another child that needs attention and support too.
Sure.
So I think, I don't know, it depends on the individual, but we try to support a family as a unit and provide support of how we can.
And how about the support for parents who may be, because again, just like every child is different, so too are all parents. They're not all the same, and how they deal with these situations. Do you find circumstances where some parents, this just becomes so overwhelming that they don't see light at the end of the tunnel?
I would say on occasion. I think especially it's very overwhelming for parents that have a child newly diagnosed with autism. A lot of times we go in, they don't know what that means for their child. They're really curious about what the future will look like for that individual. And that's nothing we can lay out for them. All we can let them know is we're going to start intervention and help them, whatever their needs may be. Some parents are very, very involved in treatment and take data for us and implement all the procedures that we do. And we do parent training as a big part of our service. Where other parents, they're not quite there yet. So we maybe do more of the intervention and just help them generalize, even if it's one skill at a time, to get them involved. So, like you said, every parent, every individual is different. And we try to meet people where they're at and, help them in the best way that we can.
And speaking of meeting people where they're at, and I know you've all alluded to it today, but so many times people think that all the services that we provide are being done inside the buildings, and that, with the exception of a couple of different teams, couldn't be further from the truth. So in meeting people where they're at, that means a lot of over the kitchen table and wherever, in schools or what have you, I would imagine, the vast majority of work that all of you do.
Yeah, we're home and community based, so we do services at the agency, but also in home or in restaurants, at the park. If we're working on safety skills, we might be on the sidewalk, walking down the street. It's really, we're meeting kids where they're at, like you said, and depending on where that behavior needs to be worked on is the environment in which we work.
We might go to the barber shop because the child, needs an exposure plan written for how to sit in a barber chair and get a haircut, or how to go to the doctor's office and get a shot. And that's something that, we've actually had really positive experiences with the community and a local doctor's office or the hospital allowing us to go to the waiting room several times, and we just practice at first walking through the door, and we practice sitting in the waiting room until that day comes where they maybe have to have that shot or that blood draw. And that's a long process a lot of times, but it can have a lot of success. So we're really fortunate that our community's been able to support us in that way.
Well, I can't believe our time is up for this month. As I mentioned to you, time goes fast when we're on here, but I do want to thank my guests, Ashley Cosgrove, Sherry Keith, and Morgan Murky, for being on the show today and sharing their insights and how applied behavioral analysis can help kids and families. I also want to thank you, the viewer, for spending time with us again this month. You can learn more about NCSS and all of our programs and services by logging on to ncssinc.org. I'm Joe Halko, and I'll be back next month with another episode of NCSS Here for You.
This has been another episode of NCSS Here for You. We hope that you found today's discussion informative and educational. Since 1958, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to high-quality services which promote healthy living and emotional well-being to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. Thanks once again for tuning in this month. NCSS's purpose remains creating a stronger community, one person at a time.